Morning, everyone. Just apologies for yesterday, as I forgot to press record. So here's me just doing a very quick explanation of all of what we talked about yesterday. So very quickly at the beginning, we asked you, what does LAM stand for? Well, LAM, of course, was the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, and it stood for land, army, money, and blame. You know, Germany lost 13% of their own territory, all their overseas colonies. Their army was reduced to 100,000 soldiers, no submarines, no planes. 6.6 million to be paid in reparations, and they had to accept the war guilt clause, which meant that they were to blame for the war, which is, you know, the real problem for Weimar Germany as a government is this negative view that people have because they connect them, one, to the armistice, which was where they earned the title November Criminals, and then again here with the Treaty of Versailles, where they were seen as selling Germany off. So what happened next? Well, the Weimar Republic situation got gradually worse. They had problems with inflation. They borrowed big amounts of money, and they just couldn't pay back the reparations as sort of at the amount that they were supposed to, of 100 million per year. Now, France, of course, was angry about this and was impatient. And what they did is they decided they would send their soldiers into the Ruhr. The Ruhr is an important part of Germany because it was where lots of their heavy industry was based. On that invasion, when the French and the Belgian troops invaded, the people stood up against it, and they met it with what's known as passive resistance. So they just refusing to work, really. And then it started to turn sour. So then what they did is they were accused of breaking machinery deliberately, protesting against the invasion, direct action by setting fire to factories, sabotaging the pumps and things like that. And eventually some of them were shot by the French soldiers. All of this, you know, continuing to build up that tension between the two countries that had gone on during World War I. And so it showed the German people had not been crushed. And so the German government supported the people. And one of the ways to support people was by printing more money. Now, so hyperinflation, the government becomes short of money. And so how they try to remedy that? Well, they try to remedy that by printing more money to pay the workers and their debts. By printing more money, the value of the money becomes less, which then impacts on confidence. So in the markets, people stop investing in the German market, in the German economy, which then means prices start to increase. And so as your prices increase, so do your wages need to increase. And so the value of the money just got out of control. So whereas in January 1919, $1 was worth 9 marks, by 1923 of November, it's worth 2 billion marks. An egg cost 80 million marks. A glass of beer, 150 million marks. You could go into a cafe, order a coffee, drink your coffee, read the newspaper, and by the time you left, not be able to afford your coffee any longer. And by 1923, the German mark becomes worthless. Which is why the image is there of the children playing with the money. You couldn't buy anything with it. You couldn't do anything with it. It just lost its value entirely, which meant that Germany was plunged into sort of real economic crises. You had workers would go, they'd get their wages at the end of a shift, go to buy what they needed. If they're at the front of the queue, they could afford it. If they're at the back of the queue, they may no longer be able to afford the item they'd gone there for. Hyperinflation, some people, you know, became penniless. They lost all their savings. It was another humiliation for the government. However, there were groups of people who did benefit. Businessmen. So if they borrowed money from the banks, all of a sudden they could pay off the debt with a bit of change. Food shortages. There wasn't enough food. But that meant that the price of food increased, which helped farmers because also they were getting more money for their goods. Foreigners found that they could invest in Germany very, very cheaply and buy things that the German people couldn't. And this is eventually remedied by a guy called Gustav Stresemann. I'm not going to talk much more about him because he's going to be the purpose of our next lesson. So on this exam paper, you get these kind of questions. The Vic question, which we've talked about before. Have a go at this question. Just pause it. Have a look. You know, what was the effect? How useful is this for the effect of hyperinflation on Germany? And then here's your question that I asked at the beginning. To what extent was the effect of hyperinflation negative? So you need to balance it up and say, well, look, you know, all these negatives were there. It had this major impact. However, don't forget, these people got away with it. These people actually did okay. Thank you.